Been there. I did that. Also got a t-shirt. Hey gang, Mark LeBlanc welcoming you back to the Alley Cat Workshop. I took a couple of weeks off to visit Amsterdam, a little bit of Belgium and London. That trip lasted a couple of weeks, so I was out of the shop for those 2 weeks. When I came back, I did do one bit of the project, which I'm going to show you next. And then I ran into a problem, which was a scarcity of wood. Not just the price, but just the fact that I couldn't find boards that were adequate for the next phase. I did get those boards. I've got 2 blanks that are ready to go. So let me show you what we're all talking about, and let's get going. So when I came back from my trip, I started working on the counters. If you recall the last video that I did on the buffet, on the cabinet build rather, was to build the outline of the counters in walnut. The inside portion is white oak. And so before filming any of this, what I did is I built the counter for the middle section and figured out how to get that done, and the results, I have to say, I'm pretty pleased. So let me walk you through what this looks like. I have 6 boards of white oak, and the walnut pieces all have grooves that hold tenon that was cut in the white oak itself. So this is secured and well aligned inside of the structure. Now I did err on the side of caution. You'll notice at the back that there is a gap here, and that is wanted. I did that gap so that this panel would have enough room to expand and contract according to changes in humidity. I did put some glue, but only on the front portion of this panel. So the intent here is that the panel will stay in place here, and if it needs to expand or contract, it will do so, but towards the back of the panel. Why did I do that? Eventually there will be a hutch that will go on this, and that will hide this particular groove. Nobody will ever see it. But I don't want this panel or this counter to crack eventually, so that's why I have this little gap here. Again, erring on the side of caution. So today what I'm going to show you is how to build these center sections for the next 2 remaining sections of the counter, and I'll walk you through all the steps. And then once we're all done, I will route the edges so that we have a nice profile, and we'll start talking about putting a finish on this. Lots of work that needs to be done, so let's get started. So this is the cabinet, the rightmost cabinet of this build, and I'm going to focus, or I'm going to show you how I'm working with this particular section. The first thing I need to do is to take very good measurements of this whole section, because that's going to influence the size of the panel that I'm going to put in here. Alright, so let's do that. And the second step is going to be to take a mark at the intersection of the long piece with the short rail, because that's going to be necessary, or that's going to be a necessary element when I use my router in a few minutes. So let's do that. Let's mark these points. So let me expand on that. Why? So the groove that I'm going to be cutting on the router is going to go the full length on the long pieces. Full length. But when it comes to these side pieces, I don't want that groove to show on the front. So I will actually cut the groove somewhere, or starting somewhere around here. So it's not going to show, but it's going to allow the panel to join in. So that's why marking these points is going to be very important. So once I've taken my measurements, I'll take this apart, go to the router, and start making these grooves. That'll be the next step. So let me take my measurements and we'll get going. All right, before I do any cut, I'm going to walk you through my setup. I have a groove cutting bit in my router. I've set the height so that it's approximately to the middle of my boards. That's the first step. This groove cutting bit will cut a groove up to half an inch deep inside of my panels. So what I'm going to do, I've got my long board here. Here's one example. I marked with an arrow the inside side of the of this board. So what I'm going to do is just do one pass on one face, flip it over, do a second pass on the other face, and the groove will be properly centered inside of the board. So I'll do that for the two long boards. For the two short boards, remember that I took a mark as to where the edge of the long boards came to. So that mark is going to be really critical, and I've actually transferred it to the other side of the board as well. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit proud of that mark, but I'm going to plunge the wood inside of the router bit, move it along, and when I get to the other side, remove it out, flip it over, and do the same thing. That will, I don't want the groove to go the full length because that would be exposed and that would look rather ugly. But flipping it on the other side will also center everything up properly. While everything is apart, I'm going to drill some extra pocket holes in the board that will be joined to the middle section of the counter. I'll then have biscuits, glue, and pocket hole screws to secure together all three sections of the counter. Some of you might recognize this panel cutting jig. It's the one Norm Abrams used on the New Yankee Workshop. It's really ideal to square up glued up panels like this. And the next step was to cut the panels to final width. So the next step in the process is to cut the tenons that are all around the center panel. And what I've done is I've put in a 1/4 inch dado blade, so just the two outside blades. And I've used this piece, this is a piece of white oak that I had used as a sample to dial in my measurements. And if I take, here's one of the side panels, if I take my sample, it's perfectly well aligned and the groove fits in just beautifully in there. So what I did with my piece is I set it up to the height so it just rubs against the top of the blade, and what I will now do is do the tenons around both short ends and also the front of the panel. That's the start. And then after that, I will set my fence a little bit further so I can do the bottom and have that, that little gap that I talked about earlier. After a little bit of fine tuning and a little bit of sanding, this is a dry assembly of the This is the right cabinet. And this is the underside of it. So you see there is that little gap as planned, maybe 1/8 of an inch, right? Again, I'm erring on the side of caution at this point. So this is ready for glue up. Again, the glue is going to be on the front and just on the front right here. And then after that, I'm going to glue the different joints before putting in the final pocket screws. So, time for some assembly of this contraption. And yeah, here we go. I think I'm going to call it a day. Tomorrow, I am going to route an edge, and then after that, I'm going to take this apart into 3 sections, do the staining, and do the finishing. Alright, see you guys tomorrow for the routing. Well, this is pretty bad here. So the good news is that this piece is going to be close to a wall and is not going to be very visible. But if you see what happened here, the router bit started sliding out of its socket. So what I've done is I've really battened it down completely and really tightened it as much as I could and redialed it in. So what I will do is I will route a little bit, stop, make sure that everything is in order, and then just keep going, but do it little bit by little bit, and even probably stop at some point and just, you know, really batten it down again. Scary stuff. I certainly don't want to have any problems like this when I'm going around the front, or else, like, what am I going to do? It's not like I can just change a few pieces and off I go. I'm pretty committed at this point. All right, gang, here we goes nothing. So aside from the fact that the shop is now messy with a whole bunch of dust, the Roman OG is really beautiful. So it worked on at least the front and the other side. I did have some issues on my initial side, as I showed you earlier. Unfortunately, hey, it is what it is. That piece is going to be, well, we'll try to hide it somehow. So guys, next step is actually to clean up the shop. Boy, does it ever need it, because you see there's a lot of sawdust on the floor and all over the place. The next step as well is going to be, believe it or not, flip this back upside down and break these into 3 separate panels. And then I've got a gazillion hours of sanding, and then I've got some finish. I'm going to be putting some finish both on the underside and on the top. Some stain and some finish, so I've got quite a bit of work to do here to complete this part of the project. The next step is going to be to start building the hutch. That's going to be a while before I can get to it, because as I said, I've got a lot of sanding, a lot of finishing, and that actually is the finishing part especially is a really slow operation. So if you like this video, I would appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate if you did that. It does help the channel. By the way, on most of my videos, about 95% of the viewers are not subscribers. So if you do, it would help me quite a bit just to keep things going. And leave a comment if you have any comments to pass along. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in a few. Wait, just can't end this video this way. That's a pretty major flaw right now that's in the build. I need to fix this, and thank God I've got an extra piece of walnut that is just long enough that I can use to replace the piece that was broken. So let me work on that now. So I knew that the short side was held using pocket screws and glue. Also knew that the glue was only where the short side connected with the long side. So, after removing the pocket screws and using my paddle cutting jig once more and setting my saw blade to its maximum height, I was able to cut off the short board without affecting anything else. First step in this operation, a success. I then returned to my router table and cut a groove in my new walnut board the same way I cut it the first time. So no surprise here, but step 2 is also a success. So I'm at the point where I'm going to be cutting the Roman OG feature on the board. So this is the old one actually, and it has a nice OG feature on at least the front and most of the side, and then it, at the beginning, and it goes really kaplooey. So what I did is I used this piece and this section over here, which is good, and that's how I managed to dial in the height of the router bit. And I'm going to route this on the table because it's a lot. This router is better at holding the bit in place, and it's easier to control when I've got a small board like this. So what I did is I ran a couple of trials. The first one was a little bit too much, too aggressive, and then the second one, if I put it right next to each other, I mean, this is about as perfect as I'm going to get it. It's really good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run the new piece, which is over here. I'm going to run a new piece on its length and on the front, and I will be able to reassemble this properly with the rest of the panel. So this fix so far going quite well. I know it's almost impossible to see here, but because this is a cross-grain cut, I do have a sacrificial block at the back so that I don't have any tear out. All in all, in the end, step 3 of this process, also a success. So finally, after putting a little bit of glue at where the short end meets up with the long boards, the long end, just sticking everything together, pocket screws, the glue, step 4 is also a success. I'm so glad I did this fix. So glad. Looks so much better. And it wasn't that bad to get it done. It wasn't that bad. Okay, now we can finish this video.